The Terran Colonial Authority governed 47 worlds across 18 star systems, each one carved from hostile environments through blood, sweat, and the peculiar human talent for surviving where nothing else could. From the sulfur storms of Prometheus Night to the ice caverns of Titan's Edge, humans had made homes in places that would kill most sentient species within hours. But none of those worlds compared to Avalon Prime. The planet hung like a sapphire jewel in the corona of its amber star, its 3 continents wreathed in silver clouds that promised rain instead of acid, storms that brought life instead of death. Rolling green hills stretched beyond horizons painted in sunset gold, while crystal-clear rivers carved paths through forests of trees that grew taller and stronger than Earth's ancient redwoods. The air itself seemed to sing with possibility. 2 million colonists called Avalon Prime home. They had spent 37 years transforming it from pristine wilderness into humanity's crown jewel, vast agricultural sectors that fed 12 other world cities that rose like monuments to human ingenuity, and research facilities that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Children who had never seen Earth ran laughing through meadows their parents had planted, while elderly couples watched sunsets that painted the sky in colors that had no names. Admiral Cassandra Knox stood at the observation deck of the orbital defense platform Iron Resolve, watching those same sunsets through reinforced transparent steel. Her reflection stared back, weathered skin that spoke of decades spent in the void, steel-gray eyes that had seen too many battles, and the kind of tired posture that came from carrying responsibility for 2 million lives. "Ma'am?" The voice belonged to Captain James Rourke, her tactical officer. His approach was measured, careful, the walk of a man bearing bad news. "We're receiving a transmission. Long-range origin unknown. It's addressed to you personally." Knox didn't turn from the window. Below, the lights of New Geneva were beginning to twinkle as Avalon Prime rotated toward night. Unknown origin. The signals bouncing off every relay satellite between here and the Centauri Nexus. Whoever sent it doesn't want to be traced. Rourke's reflection appeared beside hers in the transparent steel. "Admiral, the encryption is unlike anything we've seen. Our best cryptographers estimate it would take our quantum computers 300 years to crack it. But they sent us the key." It wasn't a question. Knox had been fighting humanity's enemies for too long not to recognize the pattern. When someone wanted to send a message they didn't want intercepted but did want understood, they always provided the key. "Yes, ma'am." Embedded in the signal itself. Knox finally turned, her movements deliberate and controlled. At 53 she had commanded fleets against the Martian separatists, held the line at the siege of Europa Station, and negotiated the peace that ended the colonial wars. She had earned her rank through strategic brilliance and an unwillingness to sacrifice human lives for political gain. But the expression on Rourke's face told her that everything she thought she knew was about to change. "Play it!" The communication array activated with a soft chime, filling the observation deck with static that gradually resolved into something that might have been music, if music could be composed of mathematics and geometric harmony. The melody was alien in a way that made the human mind struggle to process it, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Then the static cleared, and a voice emerged. It spoke perfect Terran standard, each word pronounced with crystalline precision. But the cadence was wrong. The pauses fell in places that no human throat would place them, creating a rhythm that was simultaneously hypnotic and unsettling. "Admiral Cassandra Knox, protector of the world you call Avalon Prime, defender of the species you call human." The voice carried no accent, no regional inflection, as if it had learned human speech from analyzing radio transmissions rather than conversation. "I am Quox Arnath of the Hegemony Eternal. I speak for those who have watched your kind spread across the stars like a plague seeking new hosts." Knox felt ice settle in her stomach, but her expression remained neutral. Beside her, Rourke's hand drifted unconsciously toward his sidearm. "Your species has claimed 47 worlds," the voice continued, each word falling like a hammer blow. "You have polluted pristine atmospheres with your industrial ambitions. You have carved scars across landscapes that had remained unchanged for millions of years. You have proven yourselves incapable of existing without destroying." The static intensified for a moment, then cleared again. "But the world you call Avalon Prime, this world is sacred to us. It is a garden world, one of only 17 that exist in this galaxy cluster. It was never meant for your kind. Knox found her voice. This is Admiral Knox of the Terran Colonial Authority. Identify yourself fully and state your intentions. The response came after a pause that felt calculated to unsettle. My intentions, Admiral Knox, are simple. You will evacuate Avalon Prime. All human presence will be removed within one standard solar rotation. The world will be returned to its natural state, cleansed of your contamination. That's impossible, Knox said flatly. 2 million people call this world home. The evacuation ships alone would take— You misunderstand, the voice interrupted. And for the first time, something resembling emotion crept into its tone. Amusement, perhaps, or contempt. I am not requesting your cooperation, I am informing you of your compliance. The transmission cut to static, then silence. Knox stared at the communication array for a long moment, her mind racing through protocols and possibilities. In 30 years of military service, she had faced every kind of threat the galaxy had offered. Pirates, separatists, rogue AIs, and natural disasters that could crack planets. But this was different. This was first contact. Orders, Admiral. Rourke's voice was steady, professional, but she could hear the underlying tension. Alert all department heads. I want a full tactical assessment in 30 minutes. Knox moved toward the exit, then paused. And James? Send a priority transmission to Terran Command. Tell them we may have a problem. As the blast doors sealed behind her, Knox didn't notice the small indicator light that flickered to life on the communication array. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, Korvax Shardnath was still listening, still watching, still waiting for humanity's response. Dr. Elizabeth Kane felt the vibration through the laboratory floor before she heard the announcement. The research facility, buried 3 kilometers beneath Avalon Prime's northern continent, was designed to withstand seismic events, asteroid impacts, and everything short of a direct nuclear strike. The fact that something had shaken it enough to rattle the delicate crystalline structures she was growing meant either the planet's crust was fundamentally unstable, or something very large had just entered the atmosphere at very high speed. All personnel, this is Control. Please stand by for an announcement from Admiral Knox. Elizabeth set down her tools with the careful precision that came from working with materials that could theoretically destabilize local spacetime if handled incorrectly. Around her, the quantum crystallography lab hummed with barely contained energy, exotic matter held in suspension fields, probability matrices that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, and the crown jewel of human science, a working prototype of a faster-than-light communication array that could send messages across the galaxy instantaneously. It was also the most closely guarded secret in human space. This is Admiral Knox speaking to all colonial personnel on Avalon Prime. The voice echoed through the facility's communication system, carrying the weight of absolute authority. As of 1400 hours local time, we have received what appears to be a first contact communication from an alien intelligence. Elizabeth felt her blood freeze. First contact. The moment humanity had simultaneously hoped for and dreaded for centuries. The communication was a demand for the immediate evacuation of Avalon Prime. All military and civilian personnel are hereby placed on alert status Omega. This is not a drill. The announcement continued with evacuation procedures and emergency protocols, but Elizabeth was no longer listening. Her mind was racing through the implications, for the colony, for humanity, for the project that had consumed the last 5 years of her life. The quantum relay network was humanity's answer to the fundamental problem of interstellar civilization, communication lag. Even at light speed, it took months or years to send messages between star systems. But if her team's calculations were correct, the QRN could create instantaneous communication links across any distance, using quantum entanglement principles that Einstein had called spooky action at a distance. It could also, in theory, be weaponized. Dr. Kane? The voice belonged to Dr. Yang Miso, her research partner and the only other person who fully understood the implications of their work. We need to talk. Elizabeth turned to find Yang standing in the doorway, her usually composed expression fractured by worry. Behind her, the rest of the research team was already packing critical data into secure storage containers. They can't have it, Yang said simply. Whatever these aliens want, whatever they're capable of, they cannot get their hands on QRN technology. The evacuation orders include a clause for essential research materials, Yang interrupted. But Elizabeth, think about what we're dealing with. An alien species sophisticated enough to locate and contact us, demanding we abandon our most strategically important colony. If they're hostile, the QRN might be the only advantage we have. Elizabeth looked around the laboratory that had been her world for half a decade. Millions of hours of research, breakthrough theories that had rewritten the fundamental laws of physics, and a prototype that represented humanity's greatest scientific achievement. All of it sitting 3 kilometers beneath the surface of a world that aliens were demanding they abandon. How long to download the core data? She asked. 72 hours, minimum. That's just the essential research. To properly evacuate the prototype itself, Yang shook her head. Weeks, maybe months. The intercom crackled again. All department heads report to command for emergency briefing. This facility is now under military jurisdiction. Elizabeth and Yang exchanged looks. Military jurisdiction meant soldiers, security protocols, and decisions made by people who understood tactics but not science. It meant that 30 years of research might be reduced to whatever data they could carry in their personal effects. It meant that humanity's greatest weapon might be left as a gift for their enemies. We're not abandoning it, Elizabeth said quietly. Whatever it takes, we're not leaving the QRN behind. Yang nodded, her expression hardening with determination. Then we'd better figure out how to move a quantum research facility in less time than it took to build it. As they hurried toward the command center, neither of them noticed the subtle fluctuation in the exotic matter containment fields. A resonance pattern that matched no known frequency in the human electromagnetic spectrum. But 300 kilometers above the planet's surface, aboard a ship that existed partially outside normal space-time, Korvax felt the quantum signature and allowed what passed for satisfaction to flow through its crystalline neural matrix. The humans had built something interesting, something that would make their evacuation unnecessary. The War Council convened in a chamber that had never been designed for war. Admiral Knox stood at the head of a conference table surrounded by holographic displays showing the real-time status of Avalon Prime's defenses. The numbers were not encouraging. 3 orbital defense platforms, each armed with particle beam arrays and nuclear torpedo launchers, a squadron of fast-attack corvettes designed for anti-piracy operations, ground-based missile installations that could reach low orbit under ideal conditions. It was a respectable defensive array for deterring human raiders and smugglers. Against an unknown alien force, it might as well have been rocks and pointed sticks. Situation report, Knox said without preamble. Colonel Patricia Hayes, commander of Avalon Prime's ground forces, activated the tactical display. 2 million civilians across 7 major population centers. Standard evacuation protocols would require a minimum of 6 months using our available transport capacity. That's assuming perfect conditions and full civilian cooperation. Which we won't have if panic sets in, added Captain Rourke. Admiral, what are we actually dealing with? The transmission gave us no indication of their capabilities, fleet strength, or timeline beyond 1 standard solar rotation. Knox had been wondering the same thing. 24 hours to evacuate 2 million people was impossible under any circumstances, which suggested either incompetence or deliberate provocation, given the technological sophistication required for untraceable interstellar communication. Incompetence seemed unlikely. Dr. Kane, what's the status of your research facility? Elizabeth stepped forward, her scientific composure barely masking obvious stress. Admiral, my team has made breakthroughs in quantum communication technology that could revolutionize how humanity coordinates across interstellar distances. We're talking about instantaneous communication across any range. And you can't evacuate it in 24 hours? We can't evacuate it in 24 weeks. The equipment is integrated into the planet's geological structure. Moving it would be like relocating Earth's magnetic field. Knox absorbed this information with the stoic expression that had carried her through 3 decades of impossible decisions. The research facility represented humanity's technological edge, but 2 million lives represented its future. How critical is this technology to our long-term survival? If we're facing a hostile alien civilization with superior technology, Elizabeth said carefully, it might be the only advantage we have. The chamber fell silent except for the low hum of life support systems and the distant vibration of the orbital platform's rotation. Knox studied the tactical displays, weighing impossible choices against unacceptable consequences. Colonel Hayes, what would it take to defend this world? Hayes consulted her tactical readouts. Against an unknown enemy? Everything we have, plus reinforcements from every fleet in human space, plus a miracle. She paused. Admiral, if these aliens have the technology to make demands like this, they probably have the firepower to enforce them. And if they don't, then they're bluffing with technology we can't detect or understand, which might be worse. Knox nodded slowly. It was the fundamental problem of first contact. How do you negotiate with an intelligence that might be so far beyond your understanding that your best weapons are irrelevant? Admiral Rourke said quietly, we should consider the possibility that compliance is our only option. No. The word cut through the chamber like a blade. Knox's expression had shifted from stoic consideration to something harder, more dangerous. Admiral, Hayes asked carefully. Avalon Prime is not just a colony, Colonel. It's a symbol. For 37 years, 2 million people have built something extraordinary here. They've created art, raised families, and pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. They've made this world a home. Knox's voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. Humanity doesn't abandon its homes, not to pirates, not to separatists, and not to aliens who think they can terrorize us into compliance. She turned to Elizabeth. Doctor, how long do you need to make your technology operational? The prototype is functional for short-range communication, but adapting it for military applications would require… How long? Elizabeth met her gaze, understanding flowing between them. 72 hours. Maybe less if we can integrate it with the orbital defense network. Colonel Hayes, I want evacuation plans for non-essential personnel, families with children, elderly civilians, anyone who can't contribute to planetary defense, but I also want defensive positions prepared around every major population center. Admiral Rourke interjected. We don't even know what we're fighting. Knox turned toward the primary viewport, where Avalon Prime rotated slowly beneath them. The Terminator line was crossing the northern continent, bringing night to the forests and cities that 2 million humans called home. We'll find out soon enough, she said quietly, because humanity is about to send a message of its own. As the War Council dispersed to prepare for the impossible, none of them noticed the subtle distortion in the communication array's quantum field. A signature that suggested someone had been listening to every word. Somewhere in the darkness between worlds, Korvax A. Tierneth processed this new information with something that might have been anticipation. The humans were going to fight. How delightfully predictable. The message arrived 18 hours before the deadline, carried on subspace frequencies that civilian sensors couldn't detect. Knox read it twice, her expression growing darker with each word. Admiral Knox. Your response is noted. The hegemony eternal has observed this pattern before, lesser species who mistake stubbornness for strength, who choose destruction over wisdom. You believe your defenses are adequate. You believe your technology gives you an advantage. You believe your species' reputation for tenacity will protect you. You are mistaken. The evacuation deadline stands. Comply or face the consequences of your hubris. Kixaharnath, herald of the eternal truth. Knox set down the datapad and looked out at Avalon Prime, where the lights of human civilization continued to twinkle in the darkness. Message received, she said to the empty chamber. Message understood. She keyed her personal communication code. This is Admiral Knox to all department heads. Execute Contingency 7. Contingency 7 was a protocol that had never been tested, never been seriously considered for implementation. It was the plan for what humanity would do if faced with an enemy too powerful to defeat through conventional means. It was the plan for what happened when the only choice left was to make the enemy pay such a terrible price for victory that even winning would feel like losing. Below, the lights of New Geneva continued to shine, while deep beneath the planet's surface, Dr. Elizabeth Kane worked frantically to give humanity the impossible. a weapon that could turn quantum physics into a blade sharp enough to cut across the very fabric of space. The countdown had begun, and Quaxhorneth was watching. The alien ships materialized at the edge of Avalon Prime's solar system like nightmares emerging from the void. They appeared without the characteristic gravitational distortions of human FETL drives, without the energy signatures that should have preceded their arrival, without any warning at all. One moment the system's early warning sensors showed empty space. The next, 17 vessels hung in the darkness like geometric impossibilities. Captain Rourke stared at the tactical display, his trained mind struggling to process what the sensors were telling him. Admiral, the configuration doesn't match any known ship design. The mass readings are inconsistent. Knox studied the holographic projections. Each alien vessel rendered in precise detail by the platform's military-grade scanners. They were beautiful in the way that mathematical equations were beautiful, perfect symmetries and crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them. But there was something fundamentally wrong about their geometry, as if they existed in more than 3 dimensions simultaneously. Hull composition? Unknown. The material reflects our scanning beams in patterns that suggest it's partially phased out of normal space. Rourke's voice carried the flat tone of a man reporting impossibilities as facts. Admiral, based on the energy signatures, each of those ships has the power output of a small star. The communication array activated without prompting, filling the command center with that same otherworldly harmony they had heard before. But this time, the music carried undertones of something that might have been triumph. Admiral Knox, your time has expired. Korvax Sturanos' voice carried across the void with perfect clarity, each word arriving at precisely the moment it was spoken, despite the vast distance. Another impossibility to add to the growing list. The hegemony eternal had hoped that you would choose wisdom over pride. Instead, you have chosen to demonstrate why lesser species require guidance. A pause calculated for maximum psychological impact. You will now observe the consequences of defiance. On the tactical display, one of the alien vessels began to move, not accelerating in the way human ships moved, but simply transitioning from stillness to motion without any observable propulsion. It approached Avalon Prime with the inexorable patience of a natural force. All platforms, battle stations, Knox ordered. Target the lead vessel and prepare to fire on my command. The orbital defense platforms, Iron Resolve, Steadfast Defender, and Liberty's Edge activated their weapon systems in perfect synchronization. Particle beam arrays swiveled to track the approaching alien ship while torpedo bays loaded their most powerful nuclear warheads. Ground-based missile installations across the planet's surface came online, adding their firepower to humanity's defiant response. It was an impressive display of coordinated military power. It was also completely inadequate. The alien ship reached weapons range and simply stopped. No deceleration burn, no maneuvering thrusters. One moment it was moving, the next it was motionless relative to the planet. As if the concepts of velocity and momentum were suggestions rather than laws of physics. Admiral? Rourke's finger hovered over the firing controls. Knox watched the alien vessel hang in space like a sword of Damocles, knowing that her next words would determine whether humanity's presence in this system ended in evacuation or annihilation. Fire. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Particle beams lanced across the void, their coherent energy streams designed to punch through meters of hardened battle armor. Nuclear torpedoes accelerated toward their target at significant fractions of light speed, their warheads carrying enough destructive force to crack continental shelves. Ground-based missiles added their fury to the barrage, creating a symphony of human defiance that lit up the darkness between worlds. The alien ship absorbed every shot without visible effect. The particle beam struck its crystalline hull and simply disappeared. Not reflected, not deflected. Absorbed as if the energy had been converted into something else entirely. The nuclear warheads detonated against barriers that existed somewhere between the third and fourth dimensions, their fury contained and then dismissed as irrelevant. When the attack finally ended, the alien ship remained exactly where it had been, unmarked and apparently undamaged. Korvax, Sturanos' voice carried what might have been disappointment. You fire upon us with primitive weapons powered by atomic decay. You attempt to harm beings who have transcended the limitations of 3-dimensional existence. You demonstrate the very arrogance that makes your species unsuitable for custodianship of sacred worlds." The alien ship began to move again, this time toward the orbital platform's steadfast defender. As it approached, space itself seemed to bend around its hull, creating visual distortions that made human eyes water. "Now you will learn the price of defiance." What happened next would be debated by military theorists for decades, assuming any survived to debate it. The alien ship didn't fire weapons in any sense that human technology could recognize. Instead, it extended what appeared to be a field of some kind, invisible to human sensors, but clearly visible in its effects. The field touched the orbital platform's outer hull, and the platform simply ceased, not destroyed, not vaporized, not torn apart by explosive force. It existed one moment, and didn't exist the next, as if the universe had been edited to remove it from history. 1,000 military personnel and support staff vanished with it, leaving only empty space where the platform had been. Nox felt something cold and hollow expand in her chest. She had seen ships destroyed before, watched good people die in the line of duty. But this was different. This was watching reality itself rewritten by beings who existed beyond human understanding. "All platforms, fall back to defensive positions around the planet," she ordered, her voice steady despite the ice in her veins. "Colonel Hayes, implement Contingency 7 immediately." On the planet's surface, emergency sirens began wailing across every human settlement. But deep beneath the northern continent, Dr. Elizabeth Kane heard something else, the rising harmonic frequency that meant her quantum communication array was approaching operational status. She keyed her communicator. "Admiral, the QRN is coming online. If you can buy us 6 more hours." The transmission cut to static as the alien ship turned its attention toward the planet itself. Korvax Karneth experienced something approximating satisfaction as it observed the humans' futile resistance. The emotion was filtered through neural matrices composed of crystallized thought and quantum probability fields. But the core feeling was recognizable across species. The pleasure of a lesson being properly taught. The humans had chosen to resist, and now they would learn why such choices led inevitably to suffering. The being that had once been called Kokathawarneth before transcendence had modified its essential nature, allowed its consciousness to flow across the 17 ships of the hegemony fleet. It experienced their sensors as extensions of its own perception, felt their weapons as natural appendages, and guided their movement with the precision of a conductor directing a symphony. The humans were interesting. More interesting than most species the hegemony encountered in their endless expansion across galaxy clusters. Their weapons were crude but cleverly designed. Their defensive positions showed tactical sophistication, and their communications revealed a species-wide determination that bordered on the irrational. It would make their subjugation more satisfying. Korvax Aerneth directed a second ship toward the planet's northern continent, where deep-range sensors had detected energy patterns that suggested advanced research facilities. The humans were attempting to activate some form of quantum-based technology, primitive compared to hegemony science, but potentially disruptive if allowed to develop. Such attempts at technological advancement were common among species facing first contact with their superiors. The hegemony had encountered similar responses from the crystalline minds of Arcturus III, the hive collectives of the Magellanic frontier, and countless other civilizations that had mistaken cleverness for wisdom. All had ultimately chosen to accept guidance rather than face extinction. The second ship began its descent toward the planet's surface, its hull shimmering as it transitioned between dimensional phases. Below, human energy weapons opened fire in defiance that was both admirable and pointless. Their projectiles passed through space that the ship no longer fully occupied, while their particle beams scattered against barriers that existed in mathematical dimensions rather than physical ones. Korvax Turineth allowed a pulse of communication energy to reach the human orbital command center, carrying its voice across the void with casual contempt for the limitations of light speed. "Admiral Nox, you persist in this futile resistance. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your defenses cannot protect you. Yet you continue to fight as if determination alone could overcome the laws of physics." The response came immediately, carried on primitive radio frequencies that suggested the humans had not yet mastered basic quantum communication. "This is Admiral Nox. State your terms for ending hostilities." Korvax Harneth paused its consideration. Terms implied negotiation between equals, a concept that had no meaning when one party existed on a fundamentally higher level of reality. It was like a god negotiating with bacteria, but perhaps the humans could be educated. There are no terms, Admiral. There is only inevitability. Your species will evacuate this world and accept hegemony guidance in finding suitable alternatives. You will abandon your attempts at quantum manipulation, which are dangerous in the hands of those who lack proper understanding, and you will accept that the era of human expansion has ended. The silence that followed lasted precisely 17 seconds. Long enough for the human neural system to process the implications, but not long enough for organized resistance to form. Negative, came the response, and Korvax felt something that might have been surprise ripple through its consciousness. Humanity does not abandon its worlds. We do not bow to threats, and we certainly don't take orders from aliens who are too cowardly to show their faces. Cowardly. The concept translated poorly across the vast gulf between human and hegemony understanding, but the emotional resonance was clear enough. The humans believed that superior beings should somehow be constrained by the primitive concepts of fairness and honor that governed interactions between equals. They would learn otherwise. Korvax Harneth directed the second ship to accelerate its descent, no longer content with surgical precision. The humans wanted to see their opponents. Very well. They would witness the true face of their betters, and understand why other species chose wisdom over pride. The ship broke through Avalon Prime's atmosphere like a falling star, its passage leaving ionization trails that glowed against the darkening sky. Below, human military forces opened fire with everything they possessed: surface-to-air missiles, particle cannons, and weapons systems that poured exotic energy into the sky with desperate determination. All of it was irrelevant. The ship settled over the northern continent like a mountain of crystallized mathematics, its lower surfaces beginning to glow with the energy patterns that preceded dimensional translation. In minutes, the human research facility would be translated into higher dimensional space, where their quantum experiments could cause no further disruption. But as Korvax Harneth prepared to complete this simple task, it detected something unexpected. The quantum resonance patterns emanating from beneath the planet's surface were accelerating beyond anticipated parameters. The humans were not surrendering their technology. They were activating it. 3 kilometers beneath the surface of Avalon Prime, Dr. Elizabeth Kane worked with the focused intensity of someone who knew that humanity's future might depend on the next 30 minutes. The quantum communication array hummed around her like a living thing, its exotic matter containment fields glowing with barely controlled energy. Banks of quantum processors calculated probability matrices across 17 dimensions simultaneously, while crystalline memory cores recorded the breakthrough equations that would redefine physics textbooks throughout human space. Assuming any humans survived to write those textbooks. Core resonance approaching critical threshold, reported Dr. Yang, her voice tight with concentration. Elizabeth, the alien ship is directly overhead. Whatever we're going to do, I know it. Elizabeth's hands moved across control interfaces with practiced precision, making microscopic adjustments to fields that could theoretically unravel local space-time if handled incorrectly. Yang, transfer all essential data to the backup cores. If this doesn't work, someone needs to carry the research forward. What exactly are we trying to accomplish? Yang asked, even as she began the data transfer protocols. The QRN was designed for communication, not as a weapon. Elizabeth paused in her calculations, looking around the laboratory that had consumed 5 years of her life, banks of equipment that had cost more than most planetary budgets, prototype technologies that pushed the boundaries of human understanding, and in the center of it all, a device that could theoretically send messages across any distance instantaneously. Or, with the right modifications, send other things entirely. Yang, what's the most dangerous aspect of quantum entanglement? The information paradox, Yang replied immediately. If you could transmit matter using quantum entanglement, you'd be creating perfect copies of objects across space, which violates conservation of... She stopped, her eyes widening. Elizabeth, you can't be serious. The alien ship exists partially outside normal space, Elizabeth said, her voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who had done the calculations too many times to doubt the results. It uses dimensional phasing to avoid our weapons. But if we can create a quantum entanglement field that encompasses its current position, you're talking about creating a paradox that could destabilize local space. Yang said urgently, the energy release could crack the planet's core, or it could send a message that the galaxy will remember for 1,000 years. Elizabeth looked up at the ceiling, knowing that somewhere above them, an alien ship was preparing to erase humanity's greatest scientific achievement. Yang, how long have we been working on the assumption that humanity's survival depends on superior technology? Since first contact, Yang replied. Why? Because we've been thinking about it wrong. Elizabeth's fingers moved across the final control sequences, watching as the QRN's power levels climbed toward theoretical maximums. Humanity doesn't survive because we build better weapons. We survive because we're willing to do things that other species won't consider. The quantum resonance field began to stabilize, its harmonic frequency rising beyond the range of human hearing. Throughout the facility, automated systems began implementing emergency protocols as energy readings climbed toward levels that no human technology had ever attempted. Elizabeth, Yang said quietly, if this works, what happens to us? Elizabeth met her friend's gaze, knowing there was no acceptable answer. The quantum paradox they were about to create would propagate outward from its point of origin at the speed of light, carrying effects that could theoretically be observed from neighboring star systems. They would not survive to see those effects. We send a message, Elizabeth said simply. We show the galaxy that humanity doesn't surrender its homes. Above them, the alien ship began its final descent toward the research facility, its dimensional translation field reaching down through solid rock as if the planet's crust were merely a suggestion. Deep-range sensors detected the approaching extraction beam, designed to lift the entire facility into higher dimensional space where its contents could be properly cataloged and disposed of. Elizabeth activated the QRN's primary array. Message sent, she whispered. The quantum entanglement field exploded outward from the research facility like a wave of crystallized impossibility encompassing the alien ship in a web of mathematical relationships that shouldn't exist. For one perfect moment, the ship existed in two states simultaneously, phased partially outside normal space, and locked into the dimensional coordinates where it had been attempting to exist. The paradox lasted exactly 0.0017 seconds. When it resolved, the alien ship was gone. Not destroyed, not translated into higher dimensions, but simply absent, erased from local spacetime, as if it had never existed. The quantum field collapsed back on itself, taking with it the research facility, Dr. Elizabeth Kane, Dr. Yang Miso, and every piece of equipment that had made the impossible possible. 3 kilometers above, the northern continent of Avalon Prime registered a seismic event equivalent to a moderate earthquake. In the orbital command center, Admiral Knox watched her sensor readings with something approaching awe. Report, she said quietly. The alien ship has disappeared, Captain Rourke replied, his voice carrying the flat tone of someone reporting impossibilities. No debris, no energy signature, no residual traces. It's just gone. And the research facility, also gone. Seismic activity suggests a localized collapse, but Rourke shook his head. Admiral, the quantum signature from that event was unlike anything we've ever recorded. Dr. Kane may have just rewritten the laws of physics. Knox nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the tactical display where 16 alien ships remained in formation around Avalon Prime. Dr. Kane had bought them time and proven that humanity could hurt their enemies. But the cost had been terrible, and Quex-Cerneth was no longer content with surgical precision. The remaining alien ships began moving toward the planet with the inexorable patience of natural forces, their hulls beginning to glow with energy patterns that suggested something far worse than dimensional translation. Knox keyed her communicator. All stations, this is Admiral Knox. Contingency 7 is now fully active. All civilian personnel not essential to planetary defense are to evacuate immediately. She paused, looking out at the world that 2 million humans called home, knowing that her next words would echo through history. To all remaining personnel, we have just proven that humanity can make these aliens bleed. Now let's find out how much blood they're willing to lose. The response came immediately from Quex-Cerneth, its voice carrying fury that transcended species barriers. Impressive, Admiral Knox. Your species has destroyed something that took us millennia to create. You have demonstrated capabilities that we did not believe possible from primitive matter-based intelligence. Knox felt ice form in her stomach as she realized the implications. Such capabilities, Korvac Sahirnath continued, cannot be allowed to spread beyond this system. On the tactical display, all 16 remaining alien ships began charging weapons that human sensors couldn't identify but human instincts recognized as instruments of extinction. The time for surgical precision had ended. The time for total war had begun. The battle for Avalon Prime began at 1432 local time on a Tuesday, which seemed somehow inappropriate for the moment when humanity learned that the universe was much more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Admiral Knox watched from the command center of Iron Resolve as 16 alien vessels descended toward her world like harbingers of the apocalypse. Each ship glowed with internal energies that made human sensors scream warnings about exotic matter reactions and dimensional instabilities, while their crystalline hulls began to extend weapon systems that resembled geometric impossibilities more than recognizable armaments. All platforms spread formation and engage at maximum range, Knox commanded, her voice carrying the crisp authority that had earned her rank through 3 decades of impossible decisions. Ground batteries. Prioritize the lead vessels. Make them pay for every meter. The response was immediate and devastating. Humanity threw everything it possessed into the void. Particle beams that could carve through asteroid hulls, nuclear torpedoes carrying fusion warheads, railguns that accelerated projectiles to significant fractions of light speed, and experimental energy weapons that pushed the boundaries of human engineering. For 17 seconds, the space around Avalon Prime blazed with the fury of a species that had never learned to surrender. Then the aliens fired back. The weapons that struck Liberty's edge defied every principle of physics that human science understood. They weren't energy beams or projectile weapons, but something that might have been controlled alterations in the fundamental structure of reality itself. Where they touched the orbital platform's hull, matter simply ceased to follow the rules that governed the rest of the universe. Sections of the platform aged 10,000 years in seconds, their metal components crumbling to dust as entropy accelerated beyond comprehension. Other areas experienced gravitational fields that compressed matter into densities approaching neutron star cores, while still others found themselves translated into spatial coordinates that existed 17 dimensions to the left of normal space. Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded Liberty's Edge with the same steady competence that had carried her through the Martian separatist wars. But no amount of training had prepared her for watching her ship die by having the laws of physics rewritten around it. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 15, reported her tactical officer, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "No, wait, those decks don't exist anymore. They're just gone." Rodriguez keyed her emergency communicator. "Admiral Knox, Liberty's Edge is..." The transmission cut to static as another alien weapon struck the platform's command center, translating it into a spatial location that may have existed somewhere in theoretical mathematics, but definitely didn't exist in the same universe as Avalon Prime. Knox watched the platform die with the stoic expression that had carried her through 30 years of military service. But inside, something cold and furious was taking shape. 800 good people had just been erased from existence by beings who treated human life as an inconvenience to be efficiently disposed of. "All remaining platforms implement attack pattern Omega," she ordered, her voice carrying new depths of controlled fury. "Colonel Hayes, execute Scorched Earth protocols." Attack Pattern Omega was a tactical formation that had never been tested because it violated every principle of sound military strategy. Instead of attempting to preserve defensive assets for prolonged engagement, it required every human vessel to close to point-blank range and engage the enemy with everything they possessed, including weapons systems that were never meant to be fired simultaneously. It was a formation designed for commanders who had decided that dying gloriously was preferable to living in surrender. Iron Resolve and its sister platform Steadfast Defender accelerated toward the alien fleet with the desperate fury of humanity unleashed. Their weapons systems reached overload thresholds as particle beams and nuclear torpedoes poured fire into space, while their hulls began to glow with the heat generated by pushing every system beyond design specifications. The aliens responded with their reality-altering weapons. But something had changed in the tactical equation. The destruction of Dr. Kane's research facility had created quantum distortions that propagated outward from Avalon Prime at light speed, introducing chaotic variables into the local fabric of space-time. The aliens' precision instruments, designed to operate in the mathematically perfect environment of deep space, began to encounter interference patterns that their creators had never anticipated. It wasn't enough to level the playing field, but it was enough to give humanity a fighting chance. Iron Resolve closed to weapons range with 3 alien vessels, its hull already scarred by reality-altering attacks that had translated entire sections into theoretical dimensions. Nox felt the platform shudder as another weapon struck their engineering section, aging it into structural failure, while simultaneously creating a localized gravity well that tried to collapse the entire platform into a singularity. But the platform's nuclear reactor continued to function, its fusion containment field somehow immune to the entropy effects that were reducing other systems to dust. Nox realized with grim satisfaction that human technology, for all its primitive limitations, possessed one advantage that their enemies hadn't anticipated. It was designed by a species that expected everything to break. While alien systems relied on mathematical precision and dimensional perfection, human engineering assumed that critical components would fail at the worst possible moment. Every system had backups. Every backup had alternatives. And every alternative was designed to function even when the fundamental laws of physics were no longer reliable. "Admiral," reported Captain Rourke, his voice tight with concentration as he attempted to coordinate weapons fire, while sections of the ship ceased to exist around him. "Forward torpedo bays are gone, but engineering has rerouted power to the secondary arrays. We've got maybe 10 minutes before structural integrity fails completely." Nox nodded, her attention focused on the tactical display where 17 red icons had become 16 and now 15. Humanity was dying by inches, but they were making the aliens pay for every victory. "All platforms prepare for final approach," she ordered. "If we're going down, we're taking them with us." But as Iron Resolve began its final attack run, something unprecedented happened on the planet's surface below. Colonel Patricia Hayes had commanded ground forces on 7 different worlds, from the ice caverns of Titan's Edge to the sulfur storms of Prometheus 9. She had learned that successful planetary defense required 3 things: superior positioning, overwhelming firepower, and the willingness to make choices that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Today, that rest might be measured in minutes. "All units, implement scorched earth as of now," she ordered, her voice carrying across command frequencies to every human military installation on Avalon Prime. "Priority targets are infrastructure, population centers, and anything that might be useful to an occupying force." Scorched Earth was humanity's response to facing an enemy too powerful to defeat through conventional means. If they couldn't hold their worlds, they would ensure that those worlds offered nothing of value to their conquerors. Power plants would be overloaded into fusion explosions. Atmospheric processors would be sabotaged to create centuries of toxic storms, and population centers would be reduced to radioactive ruins that would take millennia to reclaim. It was a doctrine born from the absolute conviction that some things were worse than death. Hayes watched from her command bunker as fusion charges detonated across New Geneva, the colony's capital city, disappearing in a series of controlled nuclear explosions that lit up the horizon like artificial suns. The spaceport followed, its massive fuel reservoirs creating secondary explosions that could be seen from orbit. Industrial centers, research facilities, agricultural processing plants, everything that had made Avalon Prime humanity's crown jewel was being systematically destroyed by the people who had built it. But as the destruction spread across the planet's surface, something unexpected began to happen. The quantum distortions left by Dr. Kane's facility had created a resonance effect in Avalon Prime's magnetic field, turning the planet itself into a massive quantum resonance chamber. As fusion explosions added their energy to the system, the distortions began to amplify and spread, creating interference patterns that reached into the dimensional spaces where the alien ships partially existed. Adenis watched her tactical displays with growing amazement as the readings became increasingly chaotic. "Science Division. What am I looking at?" "Colonel, the quantum cascade from the research facility destruction is interacting with the nuclear detonations," came the reply from Dr. Patricia Vang, Elizabeth Kane's former colleague. We're essentially turning the planet into a quantum weapon that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The implications hit Hayes like a physical blow. Are you saying we can hurt them? I'm saying we might be able to do more than that, Van replied, her voice tight with excitement and terror. If we can achieve resonance cascade across the entire planetary magnetic field, we could create a quantum explosion that would be visible from neighboring star systems. Hayes absorbed this information with the steady calm that had carried her through decades of impossible missions. A quantum explosion of that magnitude would definitely destroy the alien fleet. It would also sterilize everything within several light years. Doctor, what would be the effect on human colonies in nearby systems? The pause that followed told Hayes everything she needed to know. Colonel, the quantum wave would propagate at light speed. Colony worlds within 15 light-years would experience severe radiation exposure and possible atmospheric disruption. Within 5 light-years. Another pause. There wouldn't be survivors. Hayes nodded slowly, her mind calculating distances and populations. 3 human colonies within the danger zone, representing nearly 4 million people who had no idea that their survival might depend on decisions being made on a world they would never see. How long to achieve planetary resonance cascade? 40 minutes, assuming we can coordinate nuclear detonations across all major population centers, Vang replied. Colonel, we're talking about turning an entire planet into a quantum bomb. The energy release would be equivalent to a supernova. Hayes keyed her communicator. Admiral Knox, this is ground command. We may have a solution to our alien problem, but it comes with significant costs. The response came immediately, Knox's voice carrying the weight of impossible choices. Specify costs, Colonel. Total sterilization of everything within a 15 light-year radius. Hayes said simply. We can hurt them, Admiral. We can make sure they remember what happens when they threaten human worlds. But the price is every human colony in local space. The silence that followed lasted exactly 37 seconds, long enough for a trained military mind to consider implications, calculate consequences, and reach the only conclusion that honor would allow. Colonel Hayes, Knox's voice carried the absolute authority of command. You are authorized to proceed with planetary resonance cascade. All human colonies will be notified and given the opportunity to evacuate beyond the danger zone. Hayes felt something cold and determined settle in her chest. 4 million people who would have to abandon everything they had built because humanity refused to surrender to aliens who thought they could terrorize entire species into submission. It was an acceptable trade. Understood, Admiral. Initiating cascade sequence now. Across Avalon Prime, fusion charges began detonating in carefully calculated patterns designed to turn the planet's magnetic field into a weapon that could crack local space-time. The northern continent, where Darkane had made her sacrifice, became the epicenter of a growing quantum storm that would either save humanity or destroy everything they had built among the stars. But as the cascade sequence approached critical parameters, Colonel Hayes received a transmission that changed everything. Ground Command, this is Evacuation Fleet Delta approaching from the Centauri Nexus. We have 700 transport vessels and instructions to evacuate all human personnel from Avalon Prime. Hayes stared at her communications array in confusion. Evacuation Fleet Delta. Identify your commanding officer and authorization codes. This is Admiral Jonathan Cross commanding Evacuation Fleet Delta. Authorization codes follow. A stream of data appeared on Hayes's tactical display, command codes that identified Cross as one of the most senior officers in the Terran Colonial Authority. Colonel, we're here to get our people home. Admiral Cross. We are currently implementing scorched earth protocols. Evacuation is no longer the primary objective. The response came with the flat finality that could only come from someone who had already made impossible decisions. Colonel Hayes, scorched earth is cancelled. We are not abandoning Avalon Prime, and we are not sacrificing human colonies to make a point to aliens who think they can intimidate us. Hayes felt her understanding of the situation shift fundamentally. Admiral, the alien fleet is about to discover what happens when humanity has time to bring proper firepower to a fight. Cross interrupted. All ground forces are ordered to stand down from scorched earth and prepare for defensive positions. The real war is about to begin. On her tactical display, Hayes watched as 700 human vessels dropped out of FTL at the edge of the system, their combined firepower representing every military asset that humanity could assemble on short notice. The aliens had demanded Avalon Prime. Humanity was about to explain why that had been a mistake. Korvax experienced something that its species had not felt for millennia: genuine surprise. The beings it had become after transcendence beyond physical form were designed to process information across 17 dimensions simultaneously, to predict outcomes with mathematical precision, and to understand the behavioral patterns of lesser species through analysis of their communications and technology. None of those capabilities had prepared it for the sight of 700 human vessels emerging from FTL like an avalanche of crystallized fury. The ships ranged from massive dreadnoughts carrying enough firepower to crack planets to small frigates that buzzed around larger vessels like angry insects. But what struck Kixirneth was not their individual capabilities. Each ship was still primitive by hegemony standards, but rather the sheer, overwhelming audacity of their formation. The humans had assembled every military asset within 50 light-years and brought it to fight for a single world. It was tactically insane, strategically catastrophic, and completely irrational by any measure of cost-benefit analysis that a civilized species would employ. It was also the most magnificent display of species-wide determination that Kixirneth had witnessed in 10,000 years of hegemony expansion. Admiral Cross, to alien vessels came the transmission, broadcast on frequencies that suggested the humans had finally developed basic quantum communication technology. This is the Terran Colonial Defense Fleet. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system, or face the consequences. Kixirneth allowed what passed for amusement to flow through its consciousness. 700 primitive vessels, against 15 ships that existed partially outside normal spacetime. The humans might as well have threatened to defeat a hurricane with harsh language. But as it prepared to dismiss this latest display of human irrationality, Kixirneth detected something that caused its mathematical certainty to waver. The human fleet was not arranged in any tactical formation that made sense from a conventional warfare perspective. Instead, their ships were positioned in patterns that seemed almost mathematical. Geometric arrangements that formed complex equations when viewed from higher dimensional space. And those equations were very familiar. Kixirneth focused its perception on the lead dreadnought, a massive vessel that radiated energy signatures unlike anything it had detected from human technology before. The ship's hull was covered in crystalline structures that looked remarkably similar to hegemony quantum manipulation arrays, while its weapon systems appeared to be based on principles that no species should have been able to develop without millennia of research. Admiral Knox, Kixirneth transmitted, its voice carrying new undertones of careful respect. Your species continues to demonstrate capabilities that exceed our projections. Explain how you have developed quantum manipulation technology. The response came from the newcomer fleet's commander, his voice carrying the flat confidence of someone who held superior cards. This is Admiral Cross. We didn't develop it, we stole it. Turns out that when you spend 30 minutes fighting alien ships, you learn quite a bit about their technology. Our scientists have been very busy. Kixirneth felt what might have been alarm ripple through its consciousness. The destruction of the research facility had created quantum signatures that could be analyzed and potentially replicated, but the time frame suggested impossible levels of human adaptability. Unless, Admiral Cross, how long have you known of our presence in this system? About 6 months, Cross replied casually. We've been monitoring your activities in the outer systems since you arrived. Did you really think you could hide 17 ships the size of small moons? The mathematical certainty that had guided Kixirneth from millennia began to develop uncomfortable variables. If the humans had been aware of hegemony presence for months, then everything, the demand for evacuation, the 24-hour deadline, even the destruction of the research facility, had been orchestrated to achieve specific tactical objectives. Kixirneth had been manipulated by a species it had considered barely sentient. You allowed us to destroy your orbital platforms, it said, the statement carrying new implications. You sacrificed your people to learn our capabilities. We sacrificed volunteers to protect 2 million civilians and gain tactical intelligence, Cross corrected. Every person who died bought us time to understand what we were fighting and how to hurt you. On Kixirneth's tactical displays, The human fleet began moving into attack formation, not the crude arrangements it had expected, but complex patterns that demonstrated understanding of multidimensional warfare that should have taken centuries to develop. "You cannot defeat us," Korvac Sarnath declared. But for the first time in millennia, the statement carried uncertainty. "The hegemony eternal has conquered thousands of species across countless galaxies. Your technology remains primitive compared to ours." Admiral Cross's response carried something that Korvac Sarnath was beginning to recognize as quintessentially human: absolute conviction in the face of impossible odds. "Maybe," Cross admitted, "but here's the thing about humanity. We don't fight to win, we fight to make sure that everyone who survives remembers what it costs to threaten us." The human fleet opened fire. What followed was unlike any battle that had ever been fought in local space. 700 human vessels poured fire into the void with weapons systems that ranged from conventional particle beams to exotic energy arrays that seemed to be based on captured alien technology. But more than their firepower, it was their coordination that defied Korvac Sarnath's understanding. The human ships moved in perfect synchronization, their attacks timed to create overlapping fields of destruction that forced the hegemony vessels into defensive positions. When alien weapons struck human ships, other vessels immediately moved to provide cover, their formations shifting with the fluid precision of a single organism rather than individual commanders. And through it all, the quantum distortions from Avalon Prime continued to intensify, creating interference patterns that degraded hegemony weapons systems while somehow enhancing human targeting accuracy. Korvac Sarnath began to understand that it was not facing a desperate last stand, but rather the opening moves of a war that humanity had been planning for months. A war they intended to win. The first alien ship to die was overwhelmed by concentrated fire from 12 human dreadnoughts, their combined assault creating quantum cascades that overloaded its dimensional phasing systems. As it was forced back into normal space, conventional weapons finally became effective, and the ship disintegrated under the fury of atomic fire. The second ship fell when a human frigate commanded by Captain Amy Rodriguez, sister to the woman who had died aboard Liberty's Edge, performed a ramming attack that created a localized space-time collapse. Both vessels were annihilated in the resulting explosion, but the quantum signature was detected and cataloged by every human sensor array in the system. They were learning how to hurt their enemies, and they were learning fast. Korvac Sarnath felt something that its species had not experienced since achieving transcendence. Fear. Not fear of death. Beings of its nature existed across multiple dimensional states and could not be destroyed by conventional means, but fear of something far worse: the possibility that the mathematical certainties that governed hegemony expansion might be flawed. The possibility that a species could resist not through superior technology, but through superior determination. As the battle raged around Avalon Prime, Korvac Sarnath made a decision that would echo through the galaxy for millennia to come. It opened a communication channel to every ship in both fleets, its voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Human vessels, this engagement will cease immediately. Admiral Cross, I propose terms for ending hostilities." The response was immediate and uncompromising. "No terms. No negotiations. You demanded our world, and we're showing you what it costs to make demands of humanity." But even as Admiral Cross spoke, Korvac Sarnath was implementing contingencies that had been prepared for encounters with truly dangerous species. Deep in the quantum substrate that connected all hegemony vessels, massive weapons systems began charging devices that could theoretically destabilize the local sun and reduce the entire system to radioactive debris. If humanity wanted to fight to the death, Korvac Sarnath would accommodate them. But as it prepared to activate weapons that would turn Avalon Prime star into a supernova, something unprecedented happened. Every human ship in the system simultaneously broadcast the same message. Not words, but a complex mathematical equation that had been derived from the quantum signatures captured during Dr. Kane's sacrifice. An equation that perfectly described the dimensional phasing technology that allowed hegemony ships to exist partially outside normal space. "Admiral Cross to Hegemony Fleet," came the transmission. And Korvac Sarnath heard something in the human's voice that transcended species barriers. The quiet confidence of someone who held absolute tactical superiority. "We know how your ships work. We know how to track you, how to hurt you, and how to kill you. But more importantly, we know how to build ships like yours. The implications hit Corvax Hirneth like a physical blow. If humanity could reverse engineer hegemony technology, they could theoretically pose a threat to the entire galactic empire that its species had spent millennia building. They would no longer be a problem that could be solved through superior firepower. They would be a threat that required total annihilation. But as Corvax Sarnath prepared to activate the stellar destabilization weapon, Admiral Cross transmitted one final message, not to the alien fleet, but to every human colony within 500 light-years. This is Admiral Cross broadcasting on all frequencies. Today, humanity faced an alien empire that demanded we surrender our worlds and submit to their authority. Today, we showed them what happens when they mistake human kindness for human weakness. The transmission paused, and when it resumed, Cross's voice carried the weight of history being written in real time. The aliens who threatened us are withdrawing. They're leaving our system, and they're taking with them a lesson that will spread across the galaxy. Humanity protects its own. We don't surrender our worlds, we don't bow to threats, and we don't negotiate with anyone who thinks they can terrorize us into submission. Another pause, longer this time. But more than that, we've proven something to ourselves today. We've shown that humans will cross any distance, fight any enemy, and pay any price to protect each other. We are no longer scattered colonies hoping to avoid notice. We are humanity, and the galaxy now knows what that means. Corvax Sarnath listened to this declaration with something approaching what humans might have called respect. The battle for Avalon Prime had cost it 6 ships, hundreds of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, and something even more valuable, the mathematical certainty that had guided hegemony expansion for millennia. Humanity had proven that determination could overcome technological superiority, that a species could resist not through advanced weapons but through the simple refusal to surrender. It was a lesson that would force the hegemony to reconsider every assumption about how conquest should be conducted. And as the surviving alien ships prepared to withdraw from the system, Corvax Sarnath transmitted one final message to Admiral Cross. Human Commander, your species has demonstrated capabilities that we did not anticipate. This engagement has provided valuable data about your technological adaptability and tactical flexibility. We will return when we have developed appropriate countermeasures. The response came immediately, carried on quantum frequencies with the casual confidence of someone who had already won the only victory that mattered. We'll be waiting, Admiral Cross said simply. And next time we'll be ready. As the hegemony fleet translated into higher dimensional space and began the journey back to their empire, Corvax Sarnath carried with it a new understanding of what it meant to encounter a truly dangerous species. Humanity had not just fought for Avalon Prime, they had fought for the principle that some things were worth any sacrifice to protect, and they had won. 6 months after the Battle of Avalon Prime, Admiral Knox stood in the rebuilt command center of orbital platform Eternal Vigilance, watching as the last of the construction crews put finishing touches on humanity's newest defensive installations. The platform was larger than its predecessors, armed with weapons systems that combined human engineering with reverse-engineered alien technology, and staffed by crews who had learned to think in tactical dimensions that previous generations couldn't imagine. But more than its technological capabilities, Eternal Vigilance represented something else, proof that humanity could be hurt, could lose battles, could watch their greatest achievements reduced to radioactive rubble, and still rise from the ashes stronger than before. Admiral Captain Rourke approached with a datapad that contained the daily intelligence briefings. Long-range sensors are detecting increased hegemony activity in the Outer Rim territories. It looks like they're testing human colonies along the frontier. Knox nodded, unsurprised. The aliens had learned that humanity could be dangerous when directly threatened, but they were apparently curious about whether that danger extended to protecting other human settlements. They were about to find out. Signal Admiral Cross, Knox ordered. Tell him that the Colonial Defense Fleet is requested at the Tau Ceti colonies. It seems our friends want to continue their education in human warfare. As Rourke moved to implement her orders, Knox turned back to the viewport where Avalon Prime continued its eternal rotation beneath them. The scars of the battle were still visible. Blast craters where cities had once stood, radiation zones where fusion charges had been detonated, and the Crystalline Memorial, where Dr. Elizabeth Kane's research facility had made its final contribution to human survival. But the cities were being rebuilt, the radiation was being cleaned up, and the memorial served as a reminder of what humans were willing to sacrifice to protect each other. Knox keyed her personal communicator. "This is Admiral Knox to all human colonies. We've received reports of alien activity in multiple frontier systems. All defensive platforms are hereby placed on alert status Omega." She paused, looking out at the world that 2 million humans refuse to abandon. "This is also a message to any alien species monitoring our communications. Humanity has learned that the galaxy is more dangerous than we imagined. We've learned that there are beings who think they can terrorize us into submission, who believe that superior technology gives them the right to make demands of sovereign human worlds." Her voice carried the absolute conviction that had held Avalon Prime against impossible odds. "We want to be clear about something. We are no longer the scattered, defenseless colonies you might have observed when you first detected our presence. We are humanity, united by the principle that some things are worth any sacrifice to protect. We have proven that we can hurt you, that we can learn from you, and that we can defeat you." Knox's reflection stared back from the transparent steel, showing a woman who had learned that the universe was vast and dangerous and full of species who thought might made right. "But more than that, we have proven something to ourselves. We have shown that humans will cross any distance, fight any enemy, and pay any price to protect each other. We are no longer hiding among the stars, hoping to avoid notice." Her voice carried the weight of a declaration that would echo across the galaxy for generations. "We are humanity. We are watching, and we are ready." As the transmission ended, Knox remained at the viewport, watching the lights of human civilization twinkle in the darkness below. Somewhere in the vast emptiness between galaxies, alien empires were learning that the universe had acquired a new predator, a species that fought not just for territory or resources, but for principles that transcended the merely practical. They had demanded Avalon Prime. Humanity had shown them what that demand would cost. And across the galaxy, in systems where other species monitored the broadcast that traveled between human worlds, the message was being received and understood. Humanity would not surrender. Humanity would not submit. And humanity would make any species that threatened them remember the price of that defiance for 1,000 years. The Battle of Avalon Prime was over. The war for human freedom had just begun. And in the darkness between stars, 700 human vessels maintained their vigilant patrol, carrying with them the absolute conviction that some things were worth fighting for. No matter what the cost, no matter what the odds, and no matter who stood in their way. The galaxy had learned what it meant to threaten humanity. Soon it would learn what it meant to be human.